Over the past few years and during the course of my fine art digital, my art practice has evolved from an interest in landscape to a deeply personal investigation into the invisible layers of my experience, my memory, belonging, and a yearning for place. What began as a visual engagement with environments has turned into a complex conceptual project grounded in a dislocation, an identity, and relational thinking. At the heart of this shift in my practice is a realization that my works have been driven by a search for home, for rootedness, or something that I felt but couldn't name. And after living abroad for so long, I began to recognize that my engagement with land was more than an aesthetic. It was emotional. My landscapes weren't just depictions, but were acts of remembering, mapping, and feeling a sense of belonging. A breakthrough came when I encountered the Irish concept of ukas, a word that meant a deep, almost inherited sense of belonging to land and to a place. It gave language to what I had felt for years, that despite my movement across cities and continents, I see now I carried a psychological or an emotional connection to an idea of home with a landscape. This connection seeped into the materials, marks, and the silences within my work. My practice then became increasingly relational, intuitive, and slow. I began using materials gathered from specific sites: soil, rubbing, graphite, water, stone, not as symbolic props, but as carriers of memory and presence. These materials perform. They record the trace of place and embody the time I spent with them. The scrolls I now work with, long panoramic surfaces that stretch out across different spaces, they unfold like a memory itself. They resist a finality, existing instead in a state of an ever-present becoming. Conceptually, I've been drawn to ideas of diagrammatics and psychogeography, not as an academic sense, but as tools and as a way to visualize emotional and spatial relationships, to map interior landscapes through marks and gestures. My scrolls, canvases, and sketchbooks are diagrams not of information, but of presence, effect, and disruption. They chart the spaces between thought and feeling, between perception and residue. They are existences between the spaces themselves. My practice was refined through my research into artists whose practice also do with mark making place between landscapes, thought, and gesture. Richard Long's walks and markings helped me see how a journey itself could also be a drawing. Julie Marettu's multi-layered abstractions challenged me to think about landscape as a collapsing of time, space, and of emotion. Cy Twombly's gestures, inscriptions made space for vulnerability, how a line can be a rupture, a whisper, a thought, or an emotion. Conversations with Laura Reeder opened new ways of thinking about relational aesthetics, where the artwork becomes a site of interaction, reception, and response. A growing part of my practice now involves experimentation with mood and behavior in the artworks. Can an artwork feel? Can it change in response to space, or absorb the energy of the viewer or place? I've started to leave works open-ended, to see what happens when they encounter others, when they are touched, unrolled, stepped around, or experienced. Throughout this MFA, I've also faced my own limitations. I sometimes doubted whether the work was too quiet, or too unresolved, too incomplete, or too small. But I've come to see these qualities not as flaws, but as truths. The incompletion is the work. The gaps are there and where the emotions of the work live. What I've learned is that my practice is not about resolution, but about holding space for memory, longing, and connection. My art is less an object than a trace of thought and place, and of self. It's diagrammatic, but not in a technical way. Rather, it traces the lines between what can be felt, but not seen. As I look forward, I want to deepen this slowness. I plan to pursue residencies that allow me to live with the land, to collect, to walk, to write. I'm also curious about participatory formats and how others might interact with the scrolls, or how a place might change the work and change it slowly over time. Ultimately, this journey has helped me locate something essential in my work and in my practice and in myself. This, above all, is a process of connection. Connection to place, connection to memory, and to be a part of myself I had long been tracing, that now comes through my own art practice.